I turned onto Willow Lane and saw Jenna's car idling in front of Paul's house. I parked behind a maple, watched her ring his bell, then step inside quickly, hallway light already on. Before watching the video, please tell us in the comments, which country are you watching from? I stayed in the car and photographed her license plate with the porch number. The image showed condensation on the hood and a gym bag on her seat. She had said yoga, yet the studio sat across town, opposite this street. I zoomed in and captured Paul's name on the mailbox clearly. The curtains shifted, revealing silhouettes crossing the hall toward the kitchen. I recorded a short clip and included house audio for ambient confirmation. A neighbor walked his dog and glanced at my camera, then nodded once. I stepped out casually and asked, "Is this Grant Street or Willow?" He said, "Willow, that's Paul Mercer's place." I thanked him and saved the clip under the new file name. I drove to the yoga studio and checked the front window calendar. The class Jenna mentioned wasn't scheduled tonight. Another instructor handled a different session. The receptionist stood near the door taping a new flyer carefully. I asked, "Does Jenna Cole attend tonight's class?" She replied, "Her pass shows no check-in this week." I photographed the posted schedule and the entrance reader quietly. A pair of mats leaned unused near the rental rack by the wall. I took a wide shot that included the empty cubbies clearly. Then I returned to the street where her car still waited. Paul's porch light turned off, leaving the living room lamp glowing faintly. I parked farther away and opened my notes app for a quick timeline. The list showed street arrival, doorbell ring, entry, and lighting change. I added the yoga studio images with captions and locations. Jenna had said, "I'll be out of class around 9. The time between doorbell and interior light matched a normal greeting. The kitchen window glowed briefly, then dimmed again. I photographed the house exterior one last time for alignment. I pulled away slowly and turned into the gas station across the intersection. The attendant recognized me and waved through the window casually. I purchased a bottle of water and asked, "Do you know the blue sedan parked on Willow?" He said, "Belongs to a woman who stops by evenings sometimes." I nodded and paid, then saved the receipt with the location timestamp. The camera on the canopy reflected Paul's street in the background. I captured that reflection as a reference angle and filed it. Back home, I opened our shared calendar and checked Jenna's entry. She had typed Yoga Flow, Midtown Studio, without instructor or class code. Her past entries always included the instructor's name and duration. I screenshotted the difference and placed it beside the studio schedule. Then I opened our location sharing app. It displayed her phone near Willow Lane. The radius covered Paul's block and the neighboring cul-de-sac. I saved the map with roads visible and a scale marker included. A text arrived from Jenna reading, "Studio went long, grabbing tea after." I replied, "Okay, drive safe." The earlier photo of her car showed the gym bag still on the seat. Her yoga mat usually rode strapped on top, but nothing was attached. I opened our photo archive and found last week's studio snapshot for comparison. The difference was clear. Tonight's car lacked the mat completely. I wrote a note, "No mat visible, gym bag present, studio closed." I called my friend Caleb and kept the question simple. "Do you know where Paul Mercer lives?" He said, "Yes, Willow Lane, corner lot with the oak tree." I answered, "Thanks. Needed to confirm directions." He added, "He mentioned staying in tonight." I ended the call and appended his statement to the timeline. Each piece built a sequence without commentary or speculation. Patterns form faster when written with sources beside them. Jenna texted again, "Phone dying. I'll talk later. I archived the message and muted notifications for the evening. The folder now contained house photos, studio images, calendar screenshots, and a location map. Nothing in it used interpretation. Everything matched visible facts. I labeled the folder Yoga Check and created an index file. The last line read, "Observation complete. Verification pending next actions." I closed the laptop and set it on the table. When I finally heard her key turn, I stayed seated at the counter. She placed a paper cup on the sink and said, "Studio was packed." I said, "How was the sequence?" She answered, "Challenging, lots of balance work tonight." I nodded and replied, "Good to know." The conversation ended there, clean and short. The timeline on my phone required no edits. The next step would be structured and quiet. The following morning, Jenna left early for work. I waited until she backed out of the driveway, then checked the passenger seat of her car through the window. The same gym bag sat there, zipped, with no yoga mat in sight. The smell of perfume replaced the faint rubber scent that usually came from the rolled mat. I photographed the seat, zoomed in on the zipper, and saved the image under the same Yoga Check folder. At her desk calendar on the fridge, the note still read, "Yoga, Wednesday." The entry hadn't changed, and the marker ink looked new. That afternoon, she texted, "Thinking of trying hot yoga on Fridays, too." I replied, "Same studio?" She answered, "Yes, they're offering a new series." I checked the website. The studio didn't list any Friday sessions. I printed the schedule page and highlighted the absence of any listing. It confirmed a pattern. Consistent statements unsupported by external verification. Falsehoods always repeat the same structure. Identical tone, missing specifics, unchanged detail. I spent the evening aligning timelines. Tuesday's class lasted 1 hour. Her absence extended to 3. Her car location at Willow Lane placed her there for the full duration. The yoga studio's access records showed no scan under her membership number. I visited the desk again, posing as a prospective member, and asked casually about attendance logs. The receptionist confirmed that every scan created a digital record visible to staff. If she'd attended, we'd see it, she said. I thanked her, noted the name badge for documentation, and added the statement to my notes. That night, Jenna mentioned being sore from floor poses. Her hands, however, showed no chalk marks or yoga tape residue. Routine activities leave small signs, strap marks, light sweat residue, or chalk smudges. None appeared. Instead, faint traces of foundation sat evenly applied, consistent with unchanged makeup after extended indoor time. It wasn't proof alone, but it fit the emerging sequence. The next day, I tested her claim indirectly. Around the time she usually attended class, I drove toward the studio again. Parking across the street, I waited 15 minutes past her usual arrival window. No familiar car appeared. When I drove by Paul's house instead, his curtains were closed, but the porch light glowed faintly. A second vehicle, unfamiliar and compact, parked directly behind his gate. I noted the license plate and saved it with the street marker sign visible. Documentation favors environment inclusion. Context confirms event. Back home, I entered each data point in chronological order. Every statement she made linked to at least one verifiable contradiction. Her yoga claim, studio absence, map history, and visual confirmations formed a chain. Not yet confrontation material, but solid enough for escalation. Confrontation without verification creates noise. Verification without confrontation creates control. I chose control. The following morning, I left earlier than usual, parked near her office, and waited. She texted later, heading to yoga after work. I watched her leave, follow the usual route, then merge toward Willow Lane again. The same street, same motion pattern, identical pause before turning into Paul's driveway. I stayed behind 2 cars and captured each signal in sequence. At that moment, any reasonable doubt ended. She hadn't misremembered or misunderstood. She had substituted one schedule for another. When she returned home that night, she carried a yoga mat, still clean, edges rolled tightly, strap unused. I looked up from my laptop as she entered and said, "Good session?" She replied, "Sweaty, but worth it." I nodded once, checking the floor for watermarks. None appeared. I noted the exchange in my file as verbal consistency test, failed. The folder now contained 71 files, images, notes, and statements. Everything aligned chronologically, logically, and verifiably. Still, I decided not to confront her yet. Suspicion without disclosure preserves clarity. The next step would involve permanent confirmation. I began by verifying the most basic source of evidence, her car. It was registered in her name but connected to my insurance plan, which allowed shared GPS tracking through the maintenance app. I logged in and opened the trip history tab. The most recent routes confirmed repeated stops within a 2-block radius of Willow Lane. The pattern extended across 3 separate nights marked yoga on her calendar. I exported the data as a CSV file, highlighted the timestamps, and stored it in the yoga check folder. The next layer involved the studio access log. I contacted their office under the pretense of renewing a membership. The receptionist recognized Jenna's name and said, "She hasn't checked in since early May." I asked for an information pamphlet and took a quick photo of the member's screen behind the desk that displayed her inactive status. It wasn't intentional exposure, just documentation through visibility. I cropped the image later, keeping only the line showing her name and access status. Then I checked her social media. Each yoga night post featured recycled photos, identical lighting, same wall mirror reflection, identical background posters. Reverse image search confirmed the earliest upload dated back 3 months. She'd reposted older content to maintain consistency. This level of effort indicated deliberate management, not oversight. The timeline strengthened. The next stage required confirmation through observation. I borrowed a vehicle from my colleague, Thomas, to avoid recognition. That evening, Jenna texted, "Leaving work, heading to class." I parked 2 streets behind Willow Lane and waited. At precisely the same interval as before, her car passed, slowed near Paul's house, and parked in the driveway. She stepped out carrying the yoga mat for the first time, knocking twice before entering. I recorded the footage through the windshield, maintaining clear view of the plate and timestamp overlay. The video ran 2 minutes, uncut, ending with the front door closing. When I returned home, I reviewed the footage on a larger screen. Every motion aligned with her prior message timestamp. I noted each event in the log: message sent, vehicle movement, location arrival, visual confirmation. I titled the file Sequence 3. Patterns need repetition for confirmation, and this made the 3rd verified instance. To expand corroboration, I added an automatic data sync to her phone's shared location system. We had previously used the feature during road trips. She had never disabled it. That night, I compared the live ping to the stored route. The coordinates matched within 3 meters of Paul's address. I screenshotted the overlay with both pins visible. Data cross-validation reduces the margin for denial. 2 independent systems confirmed identical truth. The following day, I visited Paul's office under the pretext of dropping off a document for a mutual client. His assistant greeted me and asked if I was from Jenna's department. I said, "No, just delivering paperwork." She replied, "Paul and Jenna usually handle those reports together." That single line established professional linkage strong enough to support motive. I thanked her and left. That evening, Jenna returned home early and said, "Studio closed tonight. Water issue." I checked the studio's website. All classes running normally. I responded, "Makes sense. They probably didn't update the page yet." She smiled briefly, unaware of verification already in progress. I updated the evidence index file. GPS routes, 3 matches. Studio absence confirmation, photo plus statement. Recycled yoga photos, metadata proof. Surveillance footage, visual confirmation. Cross-location validation, live versus archived. Third-party link confirmation, assistant statement. Each entry contained corroboration from at least 2 sources. No speculation existed in the record. Every line derived from fact. The investigation now stood complete in structure, awaiting synthesis. The next move would not involve anger or confrontation. It would involve precision. If this were you, would you act or wait? The following evening, Jenna said she was meeting the girls for yoga and dinner. Her tone stayed flat, identical to every other week. I simply nodded, noted the time, and waited for her car to leave the driveway. Once she was gone, I opened the live GPS tracker. Her route displayed the same destination pattern. Southbound exit toward Willow Lane, steady speed, brief pause at the same intersection, and arrival at the same address. I didn't follow this time. Observation no longer required proximity. The record had reached saturation. I opened the prior footage, aligned timestamps, and played the segments side by side. Every arrival matched within a 1-minute range. Even the porch light turned on in the same sequence. Pattern repetition confirmed certainty. Human behavior, once formed, rarely changes until exposed. I compressed the files into a single compilation and added subtitles marking each occurrence. The 3 scenes, approach, entry, and light change, formed a consistent motion set. The visuals spoke clearly, without narrative. The next morning, I took the compilation to a data recovery specialist I sometimes used for forensic imaging. I asked him to verify that the files contained no edits. He ran checksum validation and metadata integrity tests. After a few minutes, he said, "These are original. No signs of modification." I requested a signed verification report, which he printed on letterhead. The report stated, "Video files verified authentic, timestamps consistent with device logs." I added it to the folder as the final supporting document. That night, Jenna returned from yoga again with her mat perfectly clean, strap still tight, no visible creases from use. She placed it near the entryway as always. I asked casually, "Good class?" She said, "Yeah, long one." I replied, "Must be nice having a consistent instructor." She nodded and said, "We keep the same schedule." I noted her phrasing, identical to previous descriptions. Predictable repetition is often a comfort mechanism for liars. I marked it down verbatim in my notes, time-stamped and stored. 2 days later, I completed the final verification phase. Using an old dash cam I had mounted in her car months earlier for insurance, I retrieved footage of her drive. The memory card still worked. It captured her stopping at Paul's address, exiting the vehicle, and walking out of frame. A few minutes later, another figure, Paul, opened the door and stepped outside. They spoke briefly before both disappeared indoors. The camera angle caught their reflections in the window clearly. I exported the clip and added it to the file. This was the missing link. direct interaction, verifiable environment, consistent timestamp. When she returned home that evening, I had no questions left to ask. I watched her move around the kitchen, prepare dinner, and talk about her work schedule. Each action existed like background noise. Facts don't require reaction. They simply accumulate until undeniable. I organized the entire record: photos, logs, video clips, GPS data, and verification reports, into a master folder labeled Sequence Final. I transferred the complete folder to an encrypted drive and created a read-only copy on a secondary storage device. Then I drafted a short message to HR at her company. It read, "Please review the attached documentation concerning a potential conflict of interest between employee Jenna Cole and her direct supervisor, Paul Mercer." I didn't send it yet. Timing defines impact. When she went to sleep, I placed her yoga mat by the door. The strap rested loosely, fabric smooth and unused. The space looked organized, almost deliberate. The decision point had arrived. Exposure, once prepared, simply waits for execution. The folder named Sequence Final contained every necessary proof. Its structure mirrored a professional case file: dates, visual evidence, third-party validation, and metadata reports. I reviewed each document once more to ensure no redundancy. Each event stood verifiable by at least 2 independent sources. The collection could withstand both denial and scrutiny. The next phase required delivery, but delivery without emotion. Systems, not words, would handle consequence. I began by identifying procedural routes. Jenna and Paul worked at the same firm, she as a marketing coordinator, he as her immediate supervisor. Their company maintained a compliance policy prohibiting personal relationships between management and subordinates without disclosure. Violation meant automatic review, sometimes termination. I downloaded a copy of their employee handbook directly from the firm's public portal. Section 4.3 outlined conflict of interest, personal conduct. It stated, "Employees must avoid any relationship that compromises professional judgment or company integrity." I highlighted that line and saved it with the evidence index. Next, I wrote an anonymous report draft addressed to the HR compliance officer using the firm's public ethics inbox. The subject line read, "Possible undisclosed relationship in marketing department. Supporting evidence attached." The message body contained no accusation, only factual phrasing. This material documents repeated after-hours contact between a department head and subordinate during work nights under misrepresented circumstances. Files include time-stamped video, verified metadata, and GPS correlation. I listed each attachment by file name, numbered sequentially. Language precision prevents dismissal. Neutrality demands attention. Before sending, I tested the attachments through a separate account to confirm they transferred without data loss. All files opened cleanly. I saved the outbound email as a PDF, adding it to the folder under Pending Submission. I then prepared one more layer, a physical package. I printed selected photos, GPS summaries, and the verification letter from the data specialist. These went into a plain envelope marked Compliance, Private. I addressed it to the HR department using standard mail. Anonymous tips carry more credibility when mirrored across formats. Timing the release was essential. Paul had a scheduled department review that Friday, according to Jenna's shared calendar. Submitting the evidence the day prior ensured internal discussion before the meeting. The sequence would unfold naturally, guided by protocol, not confrontation. I set the automated email delivery for Thursday at 8:45 a.m. The postal envelope, sent earlier, would arrive that same afternoon. Coordinated delivery multiplies certainty. In parallel, I secured my digital records. I backed up every file to a cloud drive under an alias, encrypted with dual authentication. If deletion requests followed, proof would remain untouched. Systems preserved truth better than emotion ever could. Revenge was no longer personal. It had become procedural integrity. That evening, Jenna mentioned another extended yoga session. I said, "Same class?" She replied, "Yes, we're preparing for a group event." Her phrasing aligned perfectly with prior lies. I added her statement to the notes as pre-report baseline, consistent fabrication. She left 20 minutes later, unaware that her actions already existed as documentation under review. Before sleeping, I verified the automated email scheduler, confirmed attachments, and double-checked encryption integrity. The clock advanced toward execution automatically. I didn't alter or adjust anything. Systems already contained the plan's logic. Once initiated, the outcome would unfold predictably. The house remained silent except for the faint hum of the router. I opened the laptop one final time, reviewed the pending submission folder, and renamed it Delivered. The cursor blinked steadily, rhythmically. Action through precision leaves no trace of anger, only order. The process now belonged to policy, not emotion. Thursday morning began quietly. Jenna prepared breakfast, humming, unaware that the report already queued for delivery. The email automation triggered at 8:45 a.m. as scheduled. The progress bar showed sent. The confirmation read, "Your message has been delivered successfully." I closed the laptop and set the device aside. The physical envelope, mailed 2 days earlier, would arrive within hours. Both channels now carried the same information, converging silently toward the same destination. By mid-morning, her phone buzzed twice while she sat at the counter. She said, "Work's chaos today. HR's doing random audits." I nodded and replied, "That happens sometimes." She shrugged, finished her coffee, and left. I waited until her car disappeared down the street before checking my backup account. The compliance mailbox had opened the attachments. The server log confirmed viewing access. The file labeled Sequence Final .mp4 showed multiple downloads from the same domain. Once viewed, control left my hands. Systems proceed autonomously once initiated. At noon, I checked the corporate directory online. Paul's profile still appeared active. By 2 o'clock, his name had been removed from the public contact page. The change occurred discreetly, without announcement. I recorded a screenshot of the directory before and after. That single comparison proved the plan had reached its first impact point. Evidence, properly structured, eliminates debate. It only generates consequence. At 5, Jenna texted, "Stuck in a meeting, might be late." I replied, "Understood." The HR department's standard investigation protocol required an immediate private interview following a compliance flag. That message confirmed the process had started. I didn't need to verify further. Her own communication timestamp completed the loop. By 7, she returned home slower than usual, placed her bag on the table, and said, "Long day." I answered, "Everything fine at work?" She hesitated, then said, "Just policy stuff. They're reviewing personal conduct codes." I said, "Makes sense. They update those often." She nodded and walked away. The following morning, she received an official email from HR. I saw the header flash across her phone screen. Confidential meeting notice, compliance review. She sighed, placed the phone face down, and said nothing. Her behavior turned methodical, quiet movements, slower gestures. I marked this observation as system response phase. Consequence had transitioned from preparation to manifestation. Paul stopped, appearing in her calendar entries. Meetings once labeled Marketing Review with PM now showed TBD. The language shift signaled removal. I checked LinkedIn that evening. His profile listed employment ended, seeking new opportunities. The update timestamp aligned with the HR email view log from the previous day. Every thread connected precisely. The weekend passed in silence. On Monday, Jenna left for work later than usual. When she returned, she said, "They're restructuring. People are leaving." I nodded. She didn't mention names. Truth rarely travels through admission. It travels through omission. 2 weeks later, the company posted an internal memo on its website. The heading read, "Commitment to Professional Conduct and Ethical Standards." It outlined revisions to relationship disclosure policies and supervisory boundaries. The paragraph under Recent Review referenced a compliance concern resolved through internal reporting. I saved the memo as confirmation notice.pdf. Its language was impersonal and administrative, exactly how closure should sound. After that, Jenna began applying for other jobs. She mentioned needing a change. I agreed it was a good idea. The yoga mat disappeared from the hallway entirely. The lie had concluded the same way it began, quietly, through routine. Would you call this revenge or justice? The HR review moved faster than I anticipated. Within 1 week, both Jenna and Paul had been called in for secondary interviews. By the next Monday, her tone changed noticeably. Short answers, delayed responses, and longer pauses between conversations. She said, "Work's uncomfortable lately. People are acting strange." I asked, "Anything specific?" She shrugged. "Maybe rumors." I nodded and returned to my laptop. She didn't realize that the rumor she feared was structured documentation moving through official channels. 2 days later, Paul's name disappeared from the company's public staff page entirely. Jenna came home early that evening, sat on the couch and said, "They let Paul go. HR said it was because of conduct violations." I replied, "That must have been difficult for the team." She said nothing, only looked at the floor. I watched her process information she couldn't reconcile. Facts, once revealed, dismantle narratives from the inside out. There's no need to argue when systems speak for you. By the end of the week, her resignation email arrived in her sent folder. The subject read, "Transition and Notice of Departure." I found it when I helped her print a resume later that night. She said, "I just need a fresh start." I said, "That makes sense." The statement was true, though incomplete. Truth, in fragments, carries more impact than confession. The following month, I received an email from an unknown address labeled Internal Acknowledgement. It thanked an anonymous individual for assisting in the enforcement of company ethics. The message included a line stating all materials were reviewed, verified, and closed. That single sentence finalized the plan. The outcome required no further management. Process completion equals closure. Around friends, Jenna framed the departure as a personal reset. No one questioned her version. Public stories thrive on convenience, not accuracy. The silence that followed suited me. Revenge, when executed cleanly, never announces itself. It simply corrects imbalance through natural consequence. Paul remained absent from public listings. Industry boards updated his name to Independent Consultant. A quiet rebranding attempt, standard procedure for those exiting under review. The HR memo about ethical compliance training became standard reading material for new employees. The system had absorbed the event into protocol, as designed. At home, the environment stabilized. The yoga mat disappeared permanently from the hallway. Her phone stayed face down during evenings. She no longer mentioned the studio or after-work sessions. Conversation centered on neutral topics: weather, groceries, errands. Lies, once dismantled, remove all texture from language. Only routine remains. One afternoon, she asked, "Do you think people can recover from mistakes?" I said, "If they recognize them as facts, not stories." She looked at me for a second, then said, "That's fair." The topic ended there. Some truths never surface in dialogue. They only exist as mutual silence. By then, my file labeled Sequence Final sat archived on an external drive. I hadn't opened it since HR's acknowledgement. The system had already processed every element of retribution on my behalf. My role was complete. Precision leaves no residue. A month later, Jenna packed a suitcase and moved to another city. No argument, no confrontation. She left a note reading, "Thanks for being patient." I read it once, placed it in a drawer, and returned to my routine. Revenge had resolved not through destruction, but through documentation. Proof, delivered correctly, doesn't shout. It simply concludes. Life adjusted itself into a quieter pattern. The empty space on the coat rack where Jenna's jacket once hung stayed unfilled for weeks. I didn't rearrange anything. The absence became structural, a reminder that systems, once tested, reveal truth without emotion. I checked the external drive once, confirmed the files were still intact, then sealed it in a drawer labeled "Closed." The drawer key hung on a separate ring, detached from everyday use. Documentation, like justice, doesn't need to stay visible to remain effective. I changed the Wi-Fi password, updated the home locks, and reset the car's GPS sharing permissions. Each action was small, procedural, final. The house felt functional again. Lights responding to timers, doors closing with quiet precision, alarms syncing correctly. Systems return to balance once interference ends. I followed the same principle everywhere else. Less reaction, more order. A few weeks later, HR sent a follow-up email marked "Case Completion." The text read, "All internal matters have been resolved. Thank you for your cooperation." The words were impersonal but exact. It confirmed the cycle had finished inside the company, just as it had inside the house. I archived the message in a folder named "Resolved." No sentiment attached, just closure. Occasionally, I drove past Willow Lane. The porch light that once marked her presence stayed off. A different car occupied the driveway now, belonging to new tenants. The old habit of observation faded naturally. The street no longer mattered. Once truth becomes record, repetition loses purpose. Friends occasionally asked about Jenna. I said, "She moved for work." The answer was factual enough. No one pressed further. People prefer short explanations that sound complete. The details lived elsewhere, in a system designed to preserve evidence, not memory. Revenge had never been about display. It was about accuracy. Inside the house, order replaced trust. I built small habits to maintain structure. Files labeled by month, receipts scanned and categorized, digital logs backed up weekly. Precision, once learned under pressure, became instinct. When truth depends on evidence, organization becomes a form of peace. One evening, I opened the notebook I'd used for the first entries. The handwritten list titled "Yoga Check." The ink had faded slightly. Each line still carried the same clarity: observation, verification, proof. I read it once, then closed it and placed it back on the shelf. Some records serve as reminders, others as templates. Either way, they belong to the same category: completed work. Jenna sent one message months later. I hope you're doing well. I replied, I am. No follow-up came. The conversation ended as efficiently as the story itself. Communication, stripped of emotion, functions like data exchange, brief, correct, final. Looking back, the process felt less like betrayal and more like calibration. Systems fail when unchecked. People do too. Precision restored both. The cost was silence, but silence has structure. It holds everything in place without resistance. Before deleting the final backup, I wrote one last note in my digital log. Always confirm before you confront. It became a personal rule, applicable beyond relationships. Documentation protects clarity, assumption erases it. I pressed save, then exit. The cursor blinked once and disappeared. That was the end. No argument, no regret, no drama. Only verified facts, closed loops, and restored balance. Revenge had never been emotional. It had been procedural. Justice delivered through accuracy. What would you have done differently? Comment your opinion below. Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe for more real stories.